many times in your life have you had to start with a blank page and create something from nothing? I can't even imagine the number of times, and I don't really have the answer for that. But that's exactly what I was doing in the summer of 2017 when I decided to apply for my Stanford MBA. And I had to answer their most infamous admissions question: what matters most to me and why? Oh yeah, and by the way, do that in 650 words. Distill the depths of your soul in 650 words on a piece of paper. Now, I don't know about you, but I was not someone who actually knew how to do that, and it took me a lot of work. And no matter how many essays you see that are the final product, I actually narrated mine, my successful Stanford GSB essay, and my successful Wharton essay, so if you want to check that out, it's in the links below. Even though I had done it well, I don't necessarily know that when you look at those essays, you entirely see the process that every individual puts in to figure out that answer for themselves. And I imagine the answer and the approach is very different for every single person, depending on their life story and their style of writing. So how did I answer that question for myself? How did I understand what story I wanted to tell? And then how did I take my concepts and stories and then craft it into a personal essay that ultimately got me in? Right? There were many different parts of the application, but how did I do the essay? So today's video is a love letter. It's a love letter to that frustrated, confused girl and version of myself that I was in the summer of 2017 who was trying to figure out how to answer this question. This video is also for all of you who are trying to answer this question, either for yourself or for the MBA admissions process, or really if you're trying to apply for anything in life. I think this methodology will work for you just fine. Today's video is going to go into 3 different topics. 1, brainstorming. How did I brainstorm? Number 2, curation. How did I select and organize the stories that I would then use in my final essay? And number 3, writing and editing. Yes, we are going to go into my tips and tricks that I kept in mind when I decided to write a personal narrative essay, which is something that not a lot of people talk about. So let's dive in. The point of an admissions essay in an application at Stanford, at an MBA program, in college, or really anything, is to tell a story. It's to tell the story of who you are as a person beyond the resume and the transcript that you've given to someone. So everyone will see the outcome, right? So they'll see all the inputs of what you did and they'll see the results. But then who is the person that then made those results happen? This is a chance for you to storytell. And it's your story to tell. You are the protagonist. But then how do you figure out what story you need to tell about yourself? Like which stories? Your life is maybe 25 plus years at that point. You've probably had a lot of different life experiences. So you need to curate which stories. But first, you need to deeply understand yourself. And how do you understand yourself? Well, you brainstorm. So this guy, this document right here, this is a result of 1 week of brainstorming that I did before I started writing any essay for any MBA admissions program. It is a 35-page document, type 10 or 8, Arial font face. Is it, yeah, Arial. Yeah. Of all the details that were important and meaningful to me personally, professionally, socially, all the different ways in my life up until that point. And I think this is the crown jewel of any application to anything that you do, whether you're applying to a job, whether you're applying to college, whether you're applying to an MBA program, whether you're applying to Stanford. It's you need to self-reflect on your life. Now, it helps to have a structure. And so I was not someone that could just look at a blank piece of paper and say, hey, Pooja, just brainstorm. No, I had to structure it for myself. And so I structured it by looking at 5 different pillars of my life. And so this section is going to go into the brainstorming that I did, the 5 different pillars that I looked at, the questions that I specifically answered. Feel free to lift all of these questions off of me, create your own, 35-page document. This was one of the most rewarding experiences that I had. Pillar number 1 is family, background, and personal upbringing. Here I really delved into who I was growing up and what impact did my childhood influences have on the woman that I became today, or at that moment of time. So I looked at, where did I grow up? Who are my siblings? Who are my parents? What, if any, influence did they have on my life growing up? What were the cultural influences growing up in my life? What did I spend my time doing growing up? What were my major interests and hobbies? Did I speak other languages? What motivated me to learn those languages? Have I traveled? Did I live anywhere for an extended period of time? What was the purpose of my travel when I did travel? Was it trekking? Was it volunteering? Was it study abroad? What was it? And then if I looked at when I lived in different countries, it was like, okay, what brought me there? What was the impact that it had on my life? Who were the most important people in my life? What role did they play? These were all the different types of questions that I answered in this section. And so I'll give you an example of how I wrote. And I wrote free form without feeling as though anyone was going to read it. So here's what I wrote. I spoke about my parents. So I'm the first generation daughter of Indian immigrants. My parents are two of the most influential people in my life. My father grew up in poverty in India and built his entire life based off of scholarship to become a physician in the United States today. He was one of 7 family members. I spoke about my grandmother. I spoke about the impact of my grandfather bringing my family here. And I spoke about the impact of knowing that I came from a heritage that was, quite frankly, destined to not survive or not thrive. And how, because of the power of education and the understanding of the immensity of what the doors education can open, am I still sitting here today in the privileged position of even thinking that I could apply to a program like this. And this understanding of how compound interest is a very powerful vehicle of growth across generations is something that has always fascinated me. And so I never take any sort of chance to be educated or to grow for granted, because I know if I had just existed maybe just a few years before or in just a different family, I likely would have been relegated to a life that's so far different than the life that I sit in today, even sitting here and talking to you on this camera, right? And so these are the types of stories that I just started writing about. And it actually, like, not even for the Stanford essay, but it is phenomenally rewarding to take your thoughts and put them on a piece of paper on your childhood and your upbringing. And you might uncover things that are not so great, right? But the point is that you're reflecting and you're synthesizing and you're feeling. You're feeling the emotions that you need to understand eventually what may matter most to you and why. The second pillar of my brainstorm was my professional background. Here I listed every single role that I had since the time that I was in college to the moment that I was brainstorming, and I listed a few particular key things. I focused on number 1, my motivations. So why did I take that specific job? Why did I join that particular industry? And why did I join that company? What were my motivations behind it? Number 2, I talked about promotions and changes in responsibility. So I talked about every single promotion I had, every shift in a role, what drew that shift to happen. If it was a promotion, what was it that I did that allowed for that to happen? And anything interesting, right? So if it was an early promotion, I wrote that down. Number 3, I wrote about anything not linear. So if I had any gap years or any time that I'd taken off, I wrote exactly why that happened, and I wrote what I learned from it and what was the reasoning behind it. So I'll give you an example. There was a free form and there was a structured format for every individual story. Free form sort of went like this. And you'll notice that if you listen to my Stanford GSB essay, a lot of it was lifted from here. So this place was called Choosing Consulting and Choosing IBM. As a young child, I can only remember having one desire. I wanted to travel. The first time I saw a globe, I wanted to go to every country I could see on that sphere so I could meet every single person that existed on this planet. I was curious to know them, what their lives were like, how they looked, how they spoke. I had an innate desire to connect with every single human being on this planet. The desire to travel then informed every single decision afterwards. My choice to attend an undergraduate business school, my life goal to attain fluency in 5 languages, my desire to live on every continent at some point in my life, save Antarctica, and just hang out with the penguins while I was there, and eventually the consulting profession that I chose. So essentially, I took it way back. I took it way back to the time that I was born. And I also write, when I looked at all the job offers that I had in banking, trading, and consulting, because I'd applied to everything because I didn't know what I wanted, right? I chose based off of the life that I wanted to create, which was seeing the world. And the closest thing that would get me to that is traveling. And so even though I had much more prestigious business school offers in banking and trading at different banks in New York City, I chose consulting at IBM because I knew it would take me one step closer to the life that I envisioned for myself, which was pursuing international business to connect with people all over the world. So this goes on and on and on. I basically paint pages of every single motivation that drove me from one thing to another, and I just wrote my heart out. So that's the way I brainstormed on my professional experience. Then I listed every single major achievement and accomplishment that I had in every single role. And I listed not the responsibilities, but instead I listed the outcomes and the results, really. This is all going to go into your resume eventually, so it's really good to do a detailed brainstorm. So I used the STAR format. I learned this when I was recruiting in junior year for jobs in college, and it was a very quick and effective way of communicating stories and results with interviewers. And I documented all of my professional stories in the STAR format. STAR stands for situation, task, action, result, and it helps you figure out a beginning. So the situation and the task is the beginning, the action is the middle, and the result is the end. And then finally, I talked about any sort of significant team experiences that I had and my role in moving successes forward or backward. This is a fairly in-depth process. The third pillar that I brainstormed on was extracurricular and community activities. And here I listed any sort of organizations, professional work committees, anything with family and friends that I was involved in, and I used a similar STAR format. So I listed out my accomplishments, I listed out what my motivations were, I listed out the nature of my involvement, the role that I had, and then I told specific stories similar to the STAR format, in the exact same format, but I did it for community and extracurriculars. The fourth pillar that I brainstormed on was college activities. Here I listed 2 different extracurriculars that I was involved in college, the impact that I had in that organization, what role I held, what were the motivations and success stories behind it in the same STAR format. And then I also listed any sort of academic accomplishments, so any honors, awards, the context of getting those awards, anything. And if I had more, I listed them there. Pillar 5 was anything additional that wasn't included in those earlier buckets. Here I focused on listing what are the top 3 accomplishments that I absolutely wanted to communicate to admissions. What are 5 words that my family and friends would use to best describe me? I actually surveyed my family, I surveyed my friends. I was like, how would you describe me to anybody? Here I also, what else? I spoke about unique circumstances that I've had a unique impact in someone's life or a very meaningful impact in someone's life. I'll give you an example. I helped raise a family friend's son when their house burned down. He lived at our house and he lived with me for maybe 2 or 3 years. And so the impact of having him in my life when I was growing up, while he was growing up, was very, very significant on my heart in a lot of different ways. And so I spoke about that. So essentially this brainstorm document, if you do it really, really well with a lot of intention, a lot of intentionality, it can become this massive document that is one of the most rewarding things to have. Because even today I can sit here and look at exactly who Pooja was in the summer of 2017 through all her life experiences. And it actually, who knows, but I think for everything in my life after, this was a very, very powerful experience to do. So highly recommend everyone do it. Step 2 is curation. Curation is where I selected and organized the stories that I would then use to answer the question, what matters most to me and why? But before I figured out the stories that I would use to interweave together, I actually had to answer that question for myself. And this is why this process was such a powerful process of self-discovery for me. Now, I think this is probably one of the most powerful experiences for anyone to do, when you can single-handedly look back at your life and be like, wow, what did I choose and why did I choose it? And wow, I might have a pattern here. Some are great, maybe some are not so great. You do the work to be honest with yourself, and then you obviously choose what you want to share and not share with an admissions committee. But you do the work. And how do you figure out what matters most to you and why? Well, you have to pattern recognize for your values. Now, listen to what I'm about to say really carefully. You need to pattern recognize for your values, your actual values, not what you think you value. And this is a really clear distinction because in our heads, a lot of times we think we might value something. But the point of your Stanford MBA admissions essay is to look at how your values have played through the actions in your life. And so if you say that in your head that I value XYZ thing, but you haven't really done things in your life that align with that, well then you're not gonna really demonstrate to them who you authentically might actually are. It might be less convincing, you might not have the detail, you might not have the results, and it'll likely fall flat. So you need to genuinely and authentically figure out what matters most to you and why. And it might be a bunch of things. For me, it was a bunch of things, right? But you do that. So how do you actually go from having the brainstorming document, which is not here, but, oh, it's here. So how do you go from this 35-page little extravaganza document? How do you go from here to then figuring out what actually matters most to you and why? Well, let's look at this little brainstorming document a bit deeper. What I did is I looked at all the major inflection points that existed in my life. Mine as an individual were related to big life changes such as the college that I chose, the professions that I chose, the industry I went to, and different countries that I chose to go and work in. And so all of those things in it had a lot of different types of motivations behind it. So I'll give you an example. When I had my first job, I had opportunities to go into trading and into investment banking at premier investment banks, right? And I chose to go to IBM and do consulting. A lot of people were scratching their heads. They were confused. They were like, what is she going after? Is she not going after prestige? She's a finance major, what is she doing? I understood that the thing that lights up my world is when I'm traveling and interacting with people and cultures everywhere. And I knew the closest thing to getting to that life of connecting with people all the time in different cultures across all different geos was if I was on a plane traveling for work. And while it was likely close to impossible that I would ever get on a project as young as I did that would take me outside of the United States, I knew getting on a plane every week, even if it's going to rural Bloomington, Illinois, which is where I went for my first work experience, I knew that that was closer to the life that I wanted than sitting 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at a trading desk all day, every day. And I knew that wasn't gonna get me to the life that I wanted. I knew this would, right? And so I was so motivated by that vision, that desire to see the world and to travel and to explore cultures and to connect with human beings that I made a life choice that a lot of people had actually at the time didn't approve and didn't support. And so that hides what my value is, right? My value is that I want to explore the world, to grow, to connect with human beings. And that value in many moments of my life played out. Similar to me, you definitely have choices that you've made in your life. And whenever you have made a choice in your life, while you might not 100% know it in the moment, you have definitely chosen not to do something else. And I think your values are hidden in the answer to the question, why did you choose to do X and not choose to do Y? And as you ask yourselves those questions over and over again at all the most powerful inflection points that you feel change the trajectory of your life, you'll start uncovering the things that have motivated you. You think about the moments where you were truly the most proud, you were the most inspired, you were the most sad, you felt like you failed, you were in the lowest moments of your life. Well, then you ask yourself, why did I feel so proud? What was it that I was doing? What was it aligned with so deeply and personal to me that made me feel excited and proud in that moment? And when I fell flat, or when I fell at this moment and I wasn't able to figure out how to get out of this, or I had this failure, I felt so down. And why did I feel so down? Because somewhere there was something that I expected or I valued that didn't play out. And it's in this type of introspection and in this type of work that you actually uncover the answer for yourself, what matters most to you and why. I feel like doing this big brainstorm and then leading up to this kind of self-reflective work is a much better way of answering these questions rather than just brainstorming the answers to the questions and then trying to retroactively go in and pull stories. Because there are stories in your life that you might not actually think about of interweaving that come organically from the brainstorm and then the thinking about what actually matters most to you and why. So that's how I did it. I eventually found out through all the different stories that I had that I really just loved exploring the world. And so my what matters most to me and why became living life with an explorer's heart, or exploring this world as though I were Magellan. Like I had this image of like, if I existed in a different time period, Pooja would be Magellan. Quite frankly, I would have hopped on a boat and I would have tried to go past the horizon to discover far off lands. And that's who I would have been in a different time. It's found expression in so many different ways in the 21st century, but that's what mattered most to me. And why did it matter most to me? Well, because I felt like my personal growth was the most amplified when I was exploring the world in this way. That I grew the quickest, I grew the fastest, and that I had the most human connection when I was meeting people of all different parts of the world. And that made me more aware of humanity and our similarities than the crazy differences that this world is constantly always trying to tell you on the news and social media, right? And I value that because when I die, I know that I want to know that I've lived, right? And so that is the energy that I feel about my life. And that was then the energy that I wanted to communicate in the form of an essay. So now I got that down, right? But then once you do the work to understand the question to yourself, there's likely a bunch of things that you care about. You then have to think about the school. So you go to Stanford GSB's website and you read about what they put out about their school and what they value. And then you see whether there's synergy. Now, I had done the work before I wanted to apply to know that I wanted them and only them, because I felt like if they were looking for a person, I was that person, and vice versa, because the way I have lived my life is very much aligned with what Stanford GSB values and looks for in students. And so that's why I knew that that was the school that I wanted to go to. That being said, let's take a look at the website. Let's look at how I read through this and what I saw. Stanford Graduate School of Business is a place where anything and everything is possible. It's where the boundaries of knowledge are pushed beyond what's imaginable, where diverse ideas and perspectives are not just accepted, they're encouraged and they're embraced. And in this unique environment of innovation and collaboration, principled leaders emerge. Faculty, students, staff, and alumni develop the courage to take risks, the passion to lead, and the motivation to make a positive impact on themselves and the world. So the things that stood out to me: courage to take risks, passion to lead, motivation to make a positive impact on the world. Now, if you look at my Stanford GSB essay that actually got me in, you'll notice that a lot of the things that naturally come out in my personality and in my life and the way that I show up is courage to take a risk, is that I'm risk taking, is that I have a passion to step up, take initiative and lead, and that I do want to have a positive impact on the world. So in some way, shape or form, while this wasn't the intent of my discovery work, I discovered that those values align. And so I'm more inclined to want to share those stories because it's a synergy. I hate that word synergy. I don't know why I just used that, but it aligns. Right? So if we look at the website a little bit more, they highlight a few things: principled leadership, transformational experience, breakthrough knowledge, and positive impact. So they define principled leadership as: we empower high potential individuals from across the globe to become responsible, impactful leaders who motivate, inspire, and lead with empathy and compassion, right? So that tells you the types of leaders that they're looking for, the types of things that they value. If you have stories and it actually aligns with what matters most to you and why, share it. That is how you think about what you need to put into your essay. The second piece, transformational experience. Well, they encourage learning from each other and the world, right? And resulting in transformation of the whole self. I I am a sucker for transformation, and quite frankly, that was what I went after when I moved to all these places trying to do all the things that I did. I wanted transformation, I wanted to impact the world, I wanted all of it. And so, was it very hard to make my stories align with what they're looking for, right? Another one, breakthrough knowledge. You push the boundaries of knowledge. This concept of pushing boundaries, crossing boundaries, going beyond what you think you're capable of. That element was definitely in my stories, although I wouldn't say it was in knowledge. Maybe it was, I don't really know, but it's subject to interpretation. And then finally, they talk about positive impact. So being an accelerator for change that takes on the world's greatest challenges, business, social, and political issues, right? I'm going off, this is circa 2013. Artificial intelligence is not even a thing. No one really knows what it is, right? And so there in that, I am breaking through, trying to face one of the world's biggest new technologies emergence into the commercial sector. That's not something that's been really done before at that time. 2013 is fairly nascent. While it looks good connecting the dots backwards, in the moment, it was genuinely a process of self-discovery. I was discovering what mattered most to me and why. And then I was looking at what Stanford valued. And I realized they actually were entirely aligned. And my life in some ways was a manifestation of the type of leadership and the type of student that they were looking for. And that's why I applied. That's why I knew I wanted to go there. Whether they wanted me or not, I was like, you don't even know it, but you want me. Okay, so this is one of my biggest pet peeves about education, just generally. You go through life, you go through English class, you go through English in college, and no one really emphasized, to me at least, I don't know, maybe they did in your schools, but maybe I just didn't go to that kind of school, how important writing is, and more importantly, how important different styles of writing will be in different parts of my life. The type of writing that you write for a personal essay like this is called a personal narrative. I ain't writing no personal narratives when I'm at work or when I'm, writing these YouTube videos. Well, kind of, you're writing personal, but you get what I'm saying. Personal narrative writing is a completely different style than the daily forms of writing that we do when we're texting, when we're writing emails, when we're doing homework assignments in school. Unless you are a journalism major in college, I don't know how many times anyone's getting a rep in actually writing a personal narrative. And so when there's two processes, if you decide to go to college and if you decide to go to grad school, there are two big inflection points in your life that require the capability and the finesse of being able to tell your personal life story in 650 words. And we are just not trained to do it. So when I became an adult in life and I started realizing this was a thing and it was a skill that my school didn't prepare me for, I started supplementing it. And so I took classes on personal essay writing. And I firmly believe that you need to constantly be upskilling your writing. And you need to be doing it in different types of ways today. Today there's long form content, there's short form content, there's professional, there's a lot of explaining writing, like telling writing. You're constantly just telling people and you need to master concision and being able to do that really well. And then there is this illustrative, descriptive knowledge, and then there's research reports, which I never gravitated towards because that just always was too many words. I clearly am a businesswoman. But this art of writing a powerful personal narrative is a very important skill in life. And while you might have all the inputs into being in a great application and you might have done all the things, you equally need to communicate it in the written word in a format that is going to do you justice, your life justice, and also be compelling. This is actually why a lot of people end up hiring MBA coaches, because there are a lot of people that are in fields very good at what they do, finance people and all these others that actually are really good, have really good stats, maybe have good stories, but they don't know how to communicate them, and this person helps them edit it. So to each their own. I think if you can figure out the principles of personal narrative writing, you can look online, you could probably put together something very, very good for yourself. So what I want to go into are a few tips and kind of principles of personal narrative writing that I reminded myself on when I started writing my essay that I think is useful to anyone, not only applying to the Stanford GSB, but really to any sort of program where you have to write a personal essay and a personal statement. Personal narrative. Number one, it is an act of storytelling. okay? You are telling a story. And so there's one major principle when you're storytelling. It's called the 3 C's, right? It's character. So who's the character? Who are the characters? In this case, you're the character, you're the protagonist. So you have character, you have conflict. There's something that needs to get done and you are going from point A to point B and there's something happening and there's a journey to be had. Okay, so there's conflict. And then there's change. So that shows you that the hero, the protagonist, went from here, went on this little journey and transformed in some meaningful way at the end. And there was transformation or there was change. So you want to make sure that when you are writing a personal narrative, you are focusing on having character, conflict, and change. It's another thing to be said that you want to have growth, reflections, and lessons in a personal narrative. The point is to demonstrate how you think or how you see the world through the words that you use and the stories that you share. And so you want to make sure you focus on the inner sort of perception of how you see the world or how that's motivated the choices that you've made. Okay? Next, you want to build your character. In this case, you have to build this robust world about who you are as a person. This is called characterization. So how does an author or a storyteller build out character? They usually rely on 4 different things. For the process of the Stanford MBA essay that I wrote, I focused on 2 of them. Number 1 is interiority. So when you share the interiority of a character, meaning their hopes, their dreams, their fears, their motivations. When you share these forces that exist within a character, you share a lot about who that human being is. You share a lot about how they make choices and how they make decisions in their life. Number 2, the actions that a character takes. The actions that a character takes reveals a lot about how they move through their life. And so these are the 2 things that I heavily relied on in my Stanford GSB essay. What were my hopes, dreams, missions, fears, and what are the actions I took in my life to manifest them? And what were the outcomes, results? And then what was the transformation in my life as a result of that? 2 other pieces of characterization that are used, but I don't know that I used it very much. And if you use it, you need to do it strategically. One is dialogue. You can't have something too dialogue heavy, but if the dialogue is there to serve to move the story and drive the story forward, then dialogue is used. And then there's physical description. So physical description of the character, and usually this is more free form, not for an MBA essay type thing. And you demonstrate physical descriptions through the use of a mirror or a photograph. This is really key. You need to show and you need to not tell. Most writing and day-to-day writing is you're just telling people, you're just explaining things. This is something where you need to illustrate through your words. I'll give you an example. I could have written, I love to travel and meet people. Instead it was, I chased her across the globe. Kigali, Bamako, Port Moresby. I was only 6 when I traveled the world, albeit virtually. I was chasing Carmen in the game, Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? The next tip is that good writing has good rhythm. So I find, this is a personal preference, I find that the most enjoyable pieces of writing, especially for a personal narrative or a personal piece, is when you see concision and clarity also alongside sentences that are long. So there's a rhythm, there's a dance to writing, there's a flow to writing. It's not like you are using 5 words for every sentence, but you have occasional small sentences and then you have the long sentences that are a lot more illustrious. So it's when you play with writing, when you create dance through your writing, that it becomes even more enjoyable and more personable, and when people read it, they feel like you're speaking to them directly. The last tip is that you want to make sure that every sentence and every word is relevant and needed. So a good trick, because you only have 650 words, right? So a good trick is if you remove a sentence, does the entire story still stand? And if it does still stand, that sentence was not needed. So I think that was the method that I really used to edit, because at some point you're gonna have to cut it down to 650 words, and it is not an easy task. So you become really pithy, you become really aware that every single sentence that you write has to be needed to drive the story forward. If it doesn't drive the story forward, cut it. And that's how you end up getting to a 650 word essay. Also, between the what matters most to you and why and the why Stanford, collectively it needs to be in a certain range, so be able to ebb and flow between what you think you want to give to one essay over another. But overall, I gave around 750 words to my what matters most to you and why, and I gave the rest to the why Stanford. So that was today's video. If you want to check out my Stanford essay, I narrated it in this video here, and I also did my Wharton MBA essay as well. So hopefully you can see how the final product looks like. This will give you a sense of how I uncovered that process for myself. And my hope is that you can use some of these tips and tricks, or use this to inspire you or inform you in anything that you're trying to do in your life. I just ask one favor. If there are things that you found specifically very helpful that I did well in this video, if you'd leave it in a comment below and let me know what worked. But if there was something that was vague or that you think I could improve from, let me know that too, because I am a big fan of feedback. Let me know if there are any other sorts of things that you want me to create videos about too. I would love to be just useful to everyone here, and I'm sending everyone lots and lots of positivity and lots of love. Signing off. But just because you a rock star, let's say you a rock star, okay? Just because you a rock star, it don't mean that you can communicate that you a rock star. You got to communicate it.